So we'll try to talk a little bit tonight about consciousness. Somebody says there's more than one level of it, and that nothing really works well until one has the higher levels of consciousness. Was that what you read, people?
I heard it.
I heard that too, so we're going to talk about it. Some of the lower levels of consciousness most people are rather acquainted with, except they didn't recognize them as such. So we will start with the lower level one is called apathy. Now, in apathy, one just really doesn't care too much about what's going on and really doesn't make any difference and assumes it'll never be any difference and it's terrible now and it's going to remain that way, something like that. So, most of us, I guess, are not in apathy tonight. We're at least all looking around holding up something, but it's still only a subdivision of this one. So we'll put two. These are all subdivisions of this one level of consciousness, which is called the ordinary waking, walking consciousness, which to some people says you're at least half asleep all the time, meaning you only run into half what's going on. Okay? Well, the second one would be fear. Now, I think most people have experienced fear a little bit. That seems, probably didn't call it fear most of the time, probably called it worry or anxiety or some of those little things, but nevertheless, let's just say the person is fearful. Now, the usual thing one is fearful of is a picture one has painted for themselves. We paint a lovely little picture called What If in the head. Forget that it's a picture, then it's a what if. It becomes very real in a matter of minutes and you have a big problem. I know because that earns my living. And, of course, I'm very happy for people to continue that, but we're going to let you in on it because I said what I'm trying to do is to work myself out of an occupation. I've been wanting to retire for years, and it don't seem to be very effective because people keep on generating these. Now, the third one is called held resentment. Now, of course, I think most people have recognized that. We resent a little something. We've called it at times we have accounts against people. They owe us a debt. They mistreated me back in 1941 or somewhere back there. Somebody did something. They rejected me or they ignored me or they said something nasty to me or they failed to pay me that $2 I loaned them or we went out 3 times for lunch and they left me with a check each time. And, we just got lots of those heavy loads against a lot of people out there. So we call that held resentment. Now, another level of this would be anger. And, of course, we all know about that, don't we? We've been ticked off at somebody because they didn't do the right thing or we were upset with them in one form or another. A little bit of anger. And the next one is boredom. Now, we know about that one also, I think. Now, this is all aspects of the lower levels of consciousness. Now, people live in this level of consciousness. They vary up and down through here. Another word probably for apathy would be self-pity. I think that would be the closest one I could think of for some synonym for it. Do you ever feel sorry for yourself, Leslie?
No.
No, never. Nobody else here ever does, but you know people who do, is that right? You know people who feel sorry for themselves, don't you? So this is the lower level of consciousness, and folks vary up and down through here, more or less, all the time. And, of course, they hope to have good health while they're doing this, and that happens to be an impossibility. So one says one never knows when illness will strike, and we go from doctor to doctor and clinic to clinic and counselor to counselor and from one thing to another trying to feel good while we live in these kind of consciousness. Now, that's all one variety of consciousness, the usual everyday variety, but this is the can vary from varied ones. We could say everybody was in the state of apathy is the lower consciousness, apathy plus 1, this is apathy plus 2, this is apathy plus 3, and this is apathy plus 4. It'd work just as well. So it comes along. Now there is one here which is kind of a borderline, a no man's land between, and that is contentment. Now contentment is a very rare state for people to be in on this planet, for one reason or another. Very few are really contented, and if it is, it's a very short length of time. And furthermore, it's usually due to circumstances that just happen that way. And those circumstances naturally don't last very long, so the person is soon out of it. So most everybody has had a chance at least of feeling contented now and then. You ever tried that, Neil? And it was usually due because everything was going pretty much my way right then. And it does do that, just due to circumstance once in a while. It just happens that way. In that state, when a person can get there, or if they can maneuver into some situation to get there, they could begin to look at the levels of higher consciousness. Now, there's number 2 up here, starts with, we'll put 6 on this and to keep our numbers going straight, and I would say 7 is vital interest. Now, anything above this will be vital interest plus 1, plus 2, plus 3, like these down here. Vital interest is when the person is consciously decided to be truly interested in something, picked up their own inner state, and was in charge. Recently we put out a little tiny book that said, "Who is in charge of my inner state?" Now, and obviously in all of this, the environment, other people, circumstances, situations are in charge of your inner state. The person is in whatever inner state the last person they met left them in, basically. Somebody was real nice to you might be way up here to contentment, but if they were insulting or hard to get along with or complaining about something you had done or failed to do, then it may be in one of this one or this one or this one or this one. Now, this is not a joke. It is really an honest evaluation of what goes on. We can meet a person, they come in, they tell me what somebody said to them. Some of them would be here, 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 but they're all in this level. So now with the vital interest, the person could begin to enjoy health. They might even be able to handle the worldly situation, the economic situation, until they could get along pretty well in that without any bother. And they could do it time in, time out, regardless of inflation, depressions, Democrat elections elected, Republicans elected, independents elected. It wouldn't make any difference. You could still go on and function quite well with it. It might even have interpersonal relationship, love, if you please, that could get along well. Of course, this down here, you can figure how long a love affair is going to last in here, couldn't you? That really is fairly easy to figure out. About as long as the proverbial June frost. It's not going to hang together very long because one of these is going to jump up. And can you imagine feeling very romantically while you have one of these? It just don't work. That's all there is to it. You just don't feel very romantic in that situation. Now, and up here, you might really be getting there. But very seldom do many people get here. They get here, maybe, as long as everything's going just right, everybody's saying the right things to me, everything's happening pretty much like I want it, but just let the least little thing go, Murphy's Law goes into effect. Whenever anything can possibly go wrong, it will, at the worst possible moment, boom, down here they go. Now, that's going to leave, they're going to feel sick, they're going to have upsets in their domestic situations, they're going to have difficulty with the money situation, and etc. Now, number 8 is called exhilaration. Now, remember that's vital interest plus 1. That can also be called enthusiasm, which the word enthusiasm means the fire of the gods. It can also be called bliss, along with several other states that could go on beyond this. And these states can occur only when the person is at least in charge of their own inner state and up here and decides to go a little further. 9 is called an artist, and it doesn't mean that that person could paint a picture or make a sculpture or even design a house. It merely means they see relationships that other people don't usually see. It could be in any field of endeavor, from cooking to engineering to art or whatever else. They see a relationship that other people don't see. So they see how things work, how things fit together. They see how come this is happening, that's happening, what's going on in the world. 10 we could call clear seeing. I have a word that says that's clairvoyant, but that's been so twisted around, so let's see clear seeing. And seeing what's going on and seeing pretty much what is going to happen from a given set of things that are going on now, unless there is a new factor gets added into it. Now, any of these states, the person can function far better than they could even in contentment. They can handle most any situation that comes along because they recognize that all the things that are situations, and mostly, is because of people with lower states of consciousness. You certainly don't expect them to do any different than what they're already doing. So that is called agape, or love. You begin to understand that people with this level of consciousness, now they don't know that there can be another one. So we are trying to point out that another level of consciousness, a higher state of consciousness, is available, is highly useful. It can be yours at any time you really decide you're going to do it. There's a few requirements, and I think we have laid these requirements out a number of times. One is to understand the picture of man, that all the conditioning factors which go to make up these states of being. Number one, that there is a state of being, a purpose that the person has that started his infancy, is that the whole purpose of living is to regain non-disturbed state. Kind of like it was before you were born, you know. The non-disturbed state. Now, what you want to gain in the non-disturbed state is to gain pleasure and comfort 100% at all times with no effort. Now, you can have it, a lot of pleasure and comfort is a byproduct, but you do have to put out a little bit of effort for it, it seems like. So the lower consciousness person unknowingly feels entitled to be in a total non-disturbed state, have lots of pleasure and comfort, no pain, at all times with no effort, simply because I'm entitled to it. And you better well know it. I'm entitled to it. I'm also entitled to have attention and approval and never to be ignored or rejected, no matter what I do. And I'm entitled to it. The fact I'm alive. I'm here. And it's also that I should feel very important and never have any sense of inferiority or unnecessary existence. And I want everybody else to notice that. Now, all this is felt that one is entitled to it. That's a basic purpose there. And the cleaner comes later. And then, of course, there is complaining in order to get it. When you don't have pleasure and comfort, the appropriate way to get it is to start complaining. Now, I imagine, and I'm not going to embarrass you by asking, but I will anyway. How many of you have complained sometime or other today? All that haven't, please stand. Okay, we have two that says they didn't complain any today. So that complaining was not necessary because evidently you had all these things down here. Maybe. It wasn't any use complaining. The second one is that you stick up for your rights. Now, when you stick up for your rights is when you get up into this area of feeling a bit anger or resentful. Now, I imagine most people have had occasion sometime or other day to feel they were sticking up for their rights. Not everybody, but some. And if it wasn't today, how about yesterday or Saturday or Monday? Monday was yesterday. I had a late start this week. It was Sunday yesterday, but that's all right. And then, of course, there is blaming goes on. Now, that one goes on considerable. You know, every little thing goes wrong. Somebody's got to be to blame for it. You know, if two cars bump together on the street, you got to find out who's to blame. An airplane crashes, what was to blame for it. the whole political scene, I suppose, this year. I haven't listened, but I'm sure it was like all other years when they had one, that each one is blaming the other for having caused it all. Have you been listening any, Claudia? No? Okay. And then, of course, we also have to be pleasing people. Now, I don't want to, you understand, but it's necessary to keep peace, and I'm obligated to do so, or Mama will get upset with me, or the kids will get upset with me, or my mate will get upset with me, so I have to please them, but I really don't want to. And then, of course, we have to believe and do as we're told by our authorities, and who likes authorities, you know? Nobody. But we have to do what they say. And then we ought to improve ourselves. Now, when one is aware of this, and that these are simply bits of conditioning, one doesn't need to put any more value on all the rattling. That's all these thoughts that run through our heads, you know, at the most inopportune moment. If it hadn't been for you, everything would have been all right, and so forth, and you can sit down and they talk morning, noon, and night. When you see that, and you know them for what they are, that they're simply old childhood bits of conditioning, and they are not worthy of paying attention to, one has gained something we refer to as self-knowing. We know that self, and that self is this one of lower consciousness, and it's the one that functions about 99% of the time and 99% of the people. So it's pretty consistent, and it more or less makes up what we know as the world. It is society, it is the people we run into, it is everything that's organized and put together. It's called the world. Now, when we become acquainted with that, and to me that is a limited time of study it, and I think you could get acquainted with it in a day, but it is so many subtle ways of doing its bit that probably 6 months would be more like an adequate course in self-knowing. About 6 months you ought to catch on to all the tricks, because they are very boring. They do the same things and say the same things year in and year out. Surely we could catch on to them. Now, they do get in a subtle way of saying it sometimes. Now, everything they say is derogatory about you or another or circumstance, and it's always a lie. So we got one start on it, that they're always derogatory. That's easy enough to keep up with, I think. Either about me or another or circumstance. Now, the way they sometimes get a little subtle, they'll say, well, you better not tell Robin or she won't understand and get mad at you. Which says something derogatory about Robin, doesn't it? It says she's a very shallow understanding and she's very intolerant and she couldn't stand to hear about it. Is that right? So I'll have to tell her a fib so she won't be upset. Now, that's a nut, I does this. That's the way these little cats work, you know. They want to lay this out so they're saying something derogatory. Now, that may not sound horribly derogatory the way it come out, but it is, isn't it? So that's when they get a little subtle. They take night lessons and they go to classes at night, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday and Monday, not just on Tuesday. They go every night, and they learn how to be derogatory in a nice way. Like saying, you mustn't tell Robin this, because she would not understand, and she would get upset and be angry with you. So you better tell her a fib and lay it out in another way so she won't be upset about it. Now, that is saying something very derogatory about you. Is that correct? It says you're very shallow, have no understanding, you just wouldn't understand. So they do little things like that. So maybe you better spend 6 months on this subject of catching up on self-knowing, which is to know the whole content of this level of consciousness. Now, when one would do that, one could begin to ignore these, and one might find themselves in this level here, and you could take up one more subject when you're in here. Down here, it's no use studying it all. The other one is called self-remembering. Now, that's the only two subjects that is really required in this type of study, self-knowing and self-remembering. Now, in self-remembering, which probably you couldn't do until at least you were in a state of contentment, except when it was induced by someone else. Now, no matter if you got one person in here in about any state, and they were around some person in a very high level of consciousness, they will feel a lot better. Any of us will, just being around them. We don't know what happened. We might be off up there and be very ecstatic for a while. But as soon as they get up and walk away, or you got up and walked away and go back down there anyway, so it hasn't been much accomplished except that you know another state of being does exist. So in self-remembering, you go there yourself without somebody else taking you or anything of the sort. Self-remembering, there's 4 questions. What am I, not who am I? I was in Salt Lake City over the weekend, and they give you a definition of knowing about who you are. That's when you have your genealogy completed all the way back to Adam. Now you know who you are. And I'm not interested. So I don't want to know who I am. I could care less. But I'm very interested in what am I, what I am. And I'm also interested in remembering where am I. And third, I'm very interested in knowing what's going on here. And it is a lot of fun. And the fourth one, I don't know what I can do. Now, we went into these a few weeks ago, or last week or so, things that you can see in that. So let's take them quickly once again. I can see, without any stretch, that what I am is a privileged invited guest where this beautiful estate called Earth, that what's going on here, obviously one big party, and obviously the only thing I can do is do what to me is a good guest. And I said to me. Now I'm not going to ask you what I should do. When one gets to that state, one recognizes one has everything, one can do anything, and one is then at least in vital interest, and one has moved into a total new level of consciousness. And of course, the more you play around with that, and here, there, and elsewhere on it, all these other state levels, the pluses on the one, vital interest, begins to manifest themselves and makes things very delightful. Now, a person in this level of consciousness is healthy because you aren't tearing yourself up all the time. This one down here is obviously unhealthy because you're forever stressing the body and tearing it up with all kinds of peculiar inner feelings. Obviously, you know how to make a living up here because you're vitally interested, your exhilaration, and people just love to be around you, and when you got enough people around you, they leave a little money on you, you know. I found out that if I can keep enough people coming around, I'll get a few bucks from somewhere and get along all right. And obviously, you can have love and romance and all those things only here because who can put up with you down here, much less love you. And so this all is fights and scraps and carrying on, and this is romance and caring and growth and everything concerned if you are in this level of consciousness. Now, it is not difficult. It has 2 simple subjects, self-knowing, which we can give you a roadmap for, and self-remembering, which we can furnish a roadmap, but I can't take the trip for you. I can only do that for myself. But if you have a roadmap and it is reasonably accurate, you can get about anywhere. If you got a map of L.A., you can find anywhere around it. Is that right, people? New York, even. You got a map, you can get there, right? But you can't say that you're going to sit in the chair and read the map and say, I bet that museum over there is really lovely. I bet that restaurant out there on that street would be delightful, but you sat at home. You're not going to experience any of it. So unless a person does self-knowing and does self-remembering, they will never get anywhere unless they have read about it, they have talked about it. I know people down in here that can recite every esoteric book in the country to you. They have studied them all. They're a graduate of every course of study around. If they allow graduates, I never allow any of us graduate from anything, so I don't have much. But they can come and talk and listen, and they can talk to other people. They can write all sorts of episodes on it. But they have never done so much as 1 hour of real study of self-knowing. They haven't observed that what's going on in themselves is what we refer to as not I, just old conditioned thoughts running through. They immediately have a problem every time one of them runs through. Nope. Just hook together as good as gold. I just make it look that way to fool the engineers. So, when this goes on, they never have exercised the least little bit to put out any study. Now, if you wanted to take up engineering, could you have just kind of skimmed through the books a little bit and got to be an engineer, or did you have to do a lot of work?
There's a little bit of work.
Yeah, a little work involved with it. If you want to be a musician, you just don't wake up some morning and decide, well, I'm going to play trumpet, and run down to the music store and get you a trumpet and become a great trumpeter. You have pounded that piano quite a bit in order to have some proficiency with it. Is that right? Neil, did you just wake up one morning and know how to do refractions and fit lenses and so forth, or did you have to beat around and work at it a little bit? Got to work at it a bit. God pity the first few that you had to work on in clinic. That's what I thought about the brave souls that came to me many years ago when I was just learning. But, you know, they come for free, so they deserve what they got. And a lot of them still doing that. And so it took a little effort. You had to practice on somebody, didn't you? I did, too. But they were brave, and persons under other reasons. Few of them had persons under other reasons for coming to. So, but we had to work at actualizing any proficiency we have in any field of endeavor. Is that somewhat correct? No matter what it is. Is that right? You're a pilot somewhere along the way. Did you just walk out one morning, get in an airplane, and go boom off, or did you have to work at it a while, Mr. Walker?
Natural.
Just natural born, went out there and got it zipped off. Is that right? Beth didn't come out quite that easy, did you? You had to work at it a little bit. So in this, there is a little effort and work, but both of them are very short and simple if one applies oneself. They're both very simple subjects. We didn't say they were very easy to practice, but even I will maintain they're easy, but I will even grant that it's difficult to some people. We'll even say that. But nevertheless, they're both subjects are extremely simple. So if you have a simple subject, even though it takes a little effort to practice it, it wouldn't be all that bad. Is that right, people? Huh? Got a simple subject. Any of us can hack it, that's for sure. Any of us get through with it and do it all right. Now, there is where I can lay it out and say, here is a possibility of you, and absolute certainty if you work at it, living in an entirely different state of consciousness. Not just going through life year in, year out, down here until mercifully death liberates you somewhere between 60 and 70 years old if you're lucky. Okay, a lot earlier sometimes if you're not so lucky, but even the best. And all I can say is we were wonderfully put together to last that long. We really got a wonderful mechanism to make it hold together that long. But it is mercifully let out of it, and I can see that it would be quite a relief to get your last breath if this is what you lived in all your days. I'd say kind of a relief. Great liberation. And it's about the only liberation people know. But you can die to this stuff and live here, and then you don't have to tear yourself up so quick. Okay, let's have questions and comments. I talk my usual allotted time on the minute. Yes.
Now, if you're in the process of radicalizing something that you want to do, do you have to have a particular talent for it, or...
some things you probably need a talent. In this one, we all have the talent for it, okay?
Right.
Okay. But now, it would probably take me 100 years longer to develop musical ability than did you, because I don't know one thing about it. And furthermore, you could play the same piece over 5 times in a row, and I think you're doing something different every time. But now I'd enjoy it each time, okay? Yes, Beth? That's one of the ways of saying it. You know, you see accurately what you want and say it accurately, or see what somebody else wants. That would be one way of saying it. Yep. That'd be one of the attributes. At least you could report clearly if you can see clearly. If you can't see clearly, you couldn't report very accurately. That's why most people say the reporting didn't work for them. They was trying to report from down here somewhere, and it flat won't work. And I tell people not to try it until they get up there, but of course a lot try it down here and it don't work. And then they say there's something wrong with the whole idea, naturally. Yes?
When you're reporting something, even at the note levels or whatever, reporting period, I don't know, is the phrasing, this will be, or I will?
Oh, I wouldn't make any particular difference. I'd probably say, well, I guess it'll be that way in a day or two.
But there's no such thing as saying kind of like...
Oh, no formulas. No, it's just blank. That's the way it is. Just like I'd say, that's a chair you're sitting in. Neil?
Earlier you made the statement about fear that it is usually due to a picture that we create in the head. Now, would you agree that the levels all the way up to, say, around 7.5 can be created through pictures that we create in our own head? And would you also...
No.
You wouldn't say that?
No, I won't agree to that. Flat won't do it.
Then how am I misinterpreting it? Because I can relate to my experience of creating a picture in my head that gets me into the lower states of enthusiasm.
You probably could, but you did something besides the picture. You might have carried the picture along with you, but you had to do something. You had to start acting a little enthusiastic, too.
A little bit, but a lot of it was due to the picture.
Well, all right, you go ahead and make the pictures and live with them. I won't contend with you. I just said I wouldn't agree with it. You asked me if I would, and I said no. No uncertain terms. Because I know too many people who work it that way, and they always wind up in difficulty. Yes, I know that you could probably dream you up a picture and feel a certain enthusiasm about it, but it won't last long enough for you to put it into effect. And it wouldn't be a higher state of consciousness. It's dependent upon a picture and not on you. And I said, you could be around somebody that's in a very high state of consciousness off up here somewhere, and you would probably feel more fantastic than you've ever felt in your life, maybe. But that was nothing that put you at a higher state of consciousness. You was just kind of experiencing it on the outside. You weren't doing it yourself. And we're talking about doing it yourself, Neil. And I don't doubt that what you could, in some state or other, feel one of these feelings up there, or a reasonable facsimile of it. There's an awful lot of facsimiles of it, you know. But it won't create it and keep it there. That only comes from having self-knowing and self-remembering and staying there for a bit with it. But you could experience most any kind of state of being, I will agree to that, including being very ecstatic, etc., without any real higher state of consciousness. It's only there because you were around it, or it was induced, or what have you, and that doesn't count in my book. Doesn't mean it wasn't there. Yes, sir. I'm going over your head, Leslie.
Is it okay to ask a question about something that you mentioned last week?
Anything you want to.
Out of my mind. You had mentioned 2 people who had come to you with physical ailments, and who you did nothing for, however, who, by the way, not having the lady with the polio, and the man who couldn't walk, who was embarrassed. What happened? What brought about the change?
I don't know. That's in my I don't know department.
Okay.
I just know what to do to get it to happen, but I don't know what happens in them.
Okay,
Well, I can tell you, they went up this way. But it wasn't due to their efforts, it was due to taking them there. Okay. Now, if they went back down below there sometime or other, they would probably at least have part of their condition return if given time. It takes quite a while to get it back, but they could do it again, okay? But if you take a person today, and they're very apathetic, and you work with them, you can watch them if you're working in a proper way. You can see them next get fearful from you. They can resent you, hate you for a bit. They can be very angry at you. They can get so bored they yawn all over the place, which, incidentally, the lady I was telling you about did. And then you get very contented, and then you get vital interest, and all the condition disappear. Now, that is not their effort. They were merely taken there, and it's up to them as to whether they stay or not, because without this, I doubt if they could stay there very long. But at least you can get all the condition gone, okay? Does that help answer your question? It's what corresponds with the state of consciousness the person experiences at the moment. And if you could upset them enough and get them back into fear or apathy, it'd probably return instantly, okay? But I'm not in the business of upsetting people much. Yes, Leslie.
Are you using the expression state of consciousness and state of being to mean two different things or the same?
Well, they probably would be equivalent, okay? You have to have the state of consciousness to experience the state of being. If you had the state of being, the state of consciousness would probably go with it, okay?
Could you talk a little about the upper two levels up there? What is an artist?
We defined it as we went by, Vivo. You were out for lunch. But I've found it as a person's ability to see relationships that our ordinary states of consciousness down here would never see.
What is it? How is it different from the one above?
Clear seeing is to see a whole bunch of things and how they relate and what's going on here. And it's an increase over there. It's 2 pluses instead of 1 plus, okay? Yes, Leslie.
So state of consciousness means what you are aware of, and being is sort of...
Why don't you try it out and find out, honey? It'd be a lot more very useful to you than if I sat here and tried to give you definitions, okay? Go up here and find out. It would make a lot more sense to you. I could tell you something now. You could only have something you could repeat and write down and so forth. Try it out. It'll worth a lot more. Okay?
When you're in vital interest, okay, you're still, like, susceptible to sensations of, like, boredom or anger. You're not...
No. That's all go. You done left that world and went to another one.
You don't even pick it up? Is that...
Oh, I can see out there that somebody else is bored or angry or something, but I'm not going to have it. That's their feelings, not mine. I don't want their darn feelings. They can have them. In their states of being. No, I don't want to have any part. I can recognize it in somebody else, but I'm not going to feel it or sense it, okay? That's theirs. And I'm very careful. This is my feeling, that's yours, okay? Yes, Pearl.
When one's in vital interest, and does thought still happen?
Does thought still happen?
Thoughts that might occur that are against oneself and other circumstance.
Okay, you mean would you have the derogatory stuff out of here come up?
Thoughts. Thoughts.
Well, I don't know what you mean by thought. To me, there's many mental activities. You could probably see creative pictures or things that you could create, design, kind of courses of action and so forth. To me, thought is the argument between this one and this one. This one says, stick up for your rights, and this one says, but you better not do that because so-and-so get upset with you. That is always conflict. And you're not in the world of conflict from here up, no. So they come to an end. In other words, these things here live in a lower level. So let's build us an analogy. We say they lived on the first floor of this building or in the basement. Now, as long as I was down there with them, that's all I can experience. But if I leave there and come to the 4th floor, they can get up here, and I'm not listening to anything they're saying. So it's like if you had people in that hear voices in their head, and they have these something. You've had those around. I have one delightful young man who calls me 3 to 5 times a day about his voices. Now, a few times I've gotten this young man to get up into at least contentment. Now, it took superhuman effort. It's a hard sell. But I got him up there for a little bit, and he heard no voices. But as soon as he went back down here, then all the voices is talking to him. Now, there's two voices that's always after him. One's a man's voice, one's a woman. The woman is this side. She's always tempting him to do something. And this one, as soon as he does it, gives him hell for it, see. So there goes the hassle in there all the time, and that's why my poor little friend is in such a mess he is in. But as long as we stay in the basement, we're going to experience the things of the basement. You know, cockroaches and black widow spiders and creepy salamanders and all those things down there where there's a little seepage and what have you. And when we leave it and come up on the main floor, we don't experience what's going on in the basement. So it's a matter of going upstairs, shall we say. Is that clear enough, Miss Bell?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, up in the upper levels then, where there's good health and
prosperity and all the things that goes with it, and romance and all the joyful friendships and inner feelings and so forth. Okay, everything's up there. Doesn't have all this other junk in it down here, right?
Do those things in the outer atmosphere become manifest through created?
You're asking me the how-to again, like a friend asked about the people. Well, I don't know how it works. Furthermore, I don't care.
I asked you once, I said once that I have heard someone say that what one carries around in one's head is generally what happens out here. And I thought you said that what one carries around in one's head becomes reflected in what happens to the body.
Well, it's usually what you do. If you go around full of anger all the time, then sooner or later the body is going to be sick. I don't know which way it's going to be sick. It could do it any number of different ways. I can't decide that. I can only watch it. Right.
Okay, so if one is joyous
pleasant, then you'd probably feel better than you've ever felt in your life, and it would be easier to earn a living or income, and it would certainly be easier to get along with all the people near and dear to you and around you, okay? Mm-hmm. That's obvious. Yeah. Because this state of consciousness is one world and this one is another world. Totally different worlds. It's like leaving one world and going to another. It's like you died to planet Earth and went to some other glorious planet. Kolob, I believe, is the right place.
Kolob.
Kolob.
You might say that those thoughts you always keep hearing if you don't place your attention on them. They're like that barking dog.
Oh, yeah, they're just so far off you don't pay attention to it. It's a bird whistling out there, or siren miles away over there.
They're always there.
Oh, they probably could be heard if you stop to listen to them. If you don't stop to listen to them, they're probably, as far as you're concerned, not there, okay? Okay? Next question? Yes, sir, John.
Creativity. People who are artists, painters, writers,
so forth and so on.
Where do they live?
Well, they live all the way from here up. We said this word artist don't concern it with the point he's a painter. I know some of the pretty good painters is down here, and I know some pretty good artists that's all up and down here, and I know some sculptors that are all up and down here. One of the most accurate sculptors I know, a man who sculpts, is an extreme alcoholic. About 3/4 of the time, and 1/4 of the time he is a whiz at making beautiful things. Okay? So he usually fiddles right in here. Knowing him for quite a while, he sticks about after they plus 2 pluses on it.
Most artists, historians, I don't know about the modern ones that exist now, you hear about the stories about them, they always, it seems like they're all down at the bottom.
Oh, yeah, they love it. They like it down there.
Cutting off their ears and all this stuff.
Yeah, sticking holes in the stem, chopping their hands off.
Artists for the whole thing.
Yeah, well, that's the picture, you know. You got to be great, you got to be starving. Live in an attic somewhere and all that kind of stuff. So that's just a conditioned picture, but they're what they do for a living, John, whether they're an artist or an engineer or a salesman or whatever, has nothing to do with where they are on here. But if they are, say, a very wonderful artist here, can you imagine what it'd be if he's up here? He'd make that stuff look like junk down there, and so on. Because he'd be better at whatever his occupation was, the higher he goes up here. If he was an engineer, he'd be a better one here than he would be down here. If he paints pictures, he'd be better here than he would be here. If he hauls wood for firewood, he'd do better up here than he would down here. That has nothing to do with it. One man said that after enlightenment, which means he found out something up here, that before enlightenment he chopped wood and carried water, and after enlightenment he chopped wood and carried water, but he did it much nicer up there.
Carry England.
Had the bubbles in it. Okay.